Yasna 49:12-50. The most striking circumstance here, after the rhetorical and moral religious peculiarities have been observed, is the 6th verse, and the question of Zarathustrian authorship. It is most striking in the Gathas or the Avesta. In that verse we have Zarathustra not named alone, which might easily be harmonized with his personal authorship, nor have we only such expressions as to Zarathustra and to us. See Yasna 28, verse 7. But we have Zarathustra named as Mahya Razeng Sahit. May he declare my regulations, which could only be said without figure of speech by some superior, if not by the prime mover himself. Were these verses then written by the prime mover? And was he other than Zarathustra? If so, the entire mass of the Gathas was of course written by him, or else their style and character may be regarded as of such a character that they could have been composed by 4 or 5 closely connected individuals. But while verses here and there are doubtless the productions of secondary persons, the mass of the Gathas cannot be regarded as the work of several different composers. They are one man's work, directly or indirectly. If then the present section, which is especially original in its tone, was not from Zarathustra, the man whose heart and soul, and we may add whose power, were in Zarathustrianism, was not Zarathustra, but some unnamed individual, far more important. The prominence of the name of Zarathustra was in that case solely owing to the personal activity of Zarathustra, supported by the social rank of the Spitimas. Zarathustra was a princely disciple, on the hypothesis mentioned, and nothing more. The real author of Zarathustrianism was, in that case, in no sense Zarathustra, compared to Zarathustra and to us, nor yet Vistaspa compared to Vistaspa and to me, nor Prashaastra compared to Prashaastra and to us, and we may also say not Gamaspa, for he is addressed in the vocative. He was mentally and personally the superior of them all. In fact, he was the power behind both the throne and home, and yet without a name. Well, if we look at this and say, well, remember the different periods to compose what we know as Zarathustrianism. The Magian period could be said to be a revival, and this is the language where these texts come from. And then there was the Achaemenian period, and then there was further periods after that, all professional priesthoods compiling something, versus somebody like a Jesus or Isaiah character who kind of steps outside of that, knew that that stuff was around, responded to that community with knowledge, but perhaps, materially, that seems to have been materially gained knowledge, like Jesus hearing stuff in the synagogue and that sort of stuff. But it appears to be a different faith, and that's why some of the things, creep back in that were there, that say, wait, wasn't this against this? It's like, oh, well, these people, the same type of people composed this. Oh, okay. But in that case, what becomes of Yasna 29, verses 6 and 8? Is it probable that the founder of a religion or of a new departure in a religion would describe another as the chosen of God if he were not in fact supposed to be thus eminent? Or if a popular and sincerely enthusiastic religious composer were about to chant a hymn at a meeting of the religious masses, would he be likely to name a person to the animated throngs whom they themselves did not feel to be the life of the religious faith, especially if that person were not prominent from the arbitrary circumstance that he was the reigning prince? I do not think that this is at all probable, but if Zarathustra had, as described, the leading name and composed a portion of the hymns with their lost companions, it is probable that he possessed no decided prominence in this matter above Vistaspa, Prashaastra, and Gamaspa. well, just like the Bible, I think a lot of things are composed about religious figures rather than by them. And obviously they delegated certain things to their community and stuff like that. Was there no central poet who composed the mass of the metrical lore, dominating by his influence those who added portions here and there? Or was there a quaternion of seers, for Zarathustra's, as one may say? Well, I've heard the three theory, but as I'm saying, Zarathustra, the Magian, the Achaemenian, was it the Sassanian, or who was it? But anyways, there was no central point who composed the mass at the metrical lore, dominating by his influence those who added portions here and there, or was there a question of seers? For Zarathustra's was, as we have said, the hymns decided, one man's soul is in them, as the composer's feelings are in his compositions, are a master's feelings in the lines of his disciples. But if there was one central figure instead of four, and he is mentioned as Zarathustra, and as the spokesman in many portions of the Gathas, being likewise known by inference to be the composer of nearly all of them, how can we account for the words, "Let him, Zarathustra, teach or proclaim my regulations"? Can the verse be regarded as put in the mouth of Ahura as elsewhere? Hardly, for Ahura is addressed in it. I therefore can only repeat this verse, as of the others which present analogous questions in Yasna 28, with which this chapter 50 stands in the closest connection, that this thoroughly original piece was composed by Zarathustra, as far as the most prominent individual in the religious struggle, dominating his party essentially and positively, and that these verses 6 through 11 were simply rhetorically put into the mouth of the monarch from the exigency of the style of the composition. And I conclude that Vistaspa was supposed to speak to them, because in the presence of Zarathustra it is extremely improbable that anyone but the titular head of the state would have been represented as saying of Zarathustra, Mahya Razeng Sahit. And so to reiterate and give you a source for this, we have the Magian period, we have the Achaemenian period, and we have the Seleucids and the Arsacids, and we have the Sassanians, and then we have, of course, the Parsis. And those are the periods of what you could say the development of Zoroastrianism. But the Sassanians is really the last time you have any. Okay, there were some changes under the Parsis, but that is absolutely not this fourth Zarathustra. The Sassanians at the latest. But, because that's where Zervanism really makes its appearance and that sort of thing. But those last three, Arsacids, the Seleucids, and the Sassanians, they could be combined to say, well, this is the fourth. But really, the Sassanians alone could, because of their calendar changes, they made enough changes that perhaps if people were to put forth a theory like that, I would say that. Just like Judaism, could you say somebody at about 540 BCE started what you could call Judaism after encountering the Moabites and making it more about one tribe instead of 12 tribes and whatever. But then you have, in between, you have Azra and his version of the scripture. But that's not quite it. So you have to, about 200 BCE, the Mishnah and that sort of stuff started, I think. And then you have the second book of Maccabees, which historically mentions Judaism. So, and then you have the rabbinic period around the time of or the Christians say Jesus was, but anyways. So you have similar phenomena in different religious communities. 1. The piece from Yasna 29:52 to Yasna 50, 1 through 5, joins well with Yasna 49, although the tone is brighter, as he begins with questions in Yasna 48, 8 through 11, after the prospective prayers of Yasna 48, 1 through 7, in which he looks forward to a crisis at the armed struggle. So now, after a hostile chief has gotten the upper hand, he cries out once more for interrogatives, uttering the questions not of curiosity but of mournful devotion. Now, in the Quran, you have some of this too, as some of the sound or color and some other aspects kind of teach you that the order is not, first of all, it's not biggest chapter to smallest chapter. That doesn't pan out. The biggest chapter is chapter 2. The second biggest is chapter 4 there. So, but just like this, we have certain sound patterns and other sorts of things that kind of tie the chapters together. And some of them, in some aspects you skip a couple chapters in here, but when you hear things and you know more about the language, you kind of understand more how these things combine. The storm has broken over us, so he would seem to say, and I have prayed for grace to know how we may administer. See Yasna 44, verse 9. The all-powerful means of help, the da'ana in which the righteous order is set. See Yasna 49, verse 3. I have cried to thee for chief and peer. Verse 7, naming Fasha Astra, the Gamaspa, and the Yahin. And now, while I invoke you, praying for what in your selection is the best. Yasna 28, verse 11. Yasna 44, verse 10. I would more than ever declare that I have none other help than thee and thy saving order, too. And he acts once more to know how he who seeks to further the sacred herds as an emblem of the moral thrift of the provinces should proceed, and his allotted work. Three, answering his own question, he says that it is by advance upon the enemy, he declares the heroic settler who pushes the holy system to the utmost verge of the sacred territory, or still further, was the man to gain the kind, or the seeking profit. 4. But in the midst of struggles, he anticipated Garodman with its praises. 5. For they were all prepared for both worship and work, since God had approached to aid his prophet, encouraging his discouraged spirit. 6. Here Vistaspa is represented as intervening, and he addresses Ahura literally, but Zarathustra really exhorting him indirectly to continue on in his work of propagation, undismayed by present circumstances. 7. And with Zarathustra he would re-engage the other powerful helpers, whom he would yoke on as steeds to gain God's praise in heaven by passing over every bridge of trial safely. 8. Having heard from Zarathustra his metric words, he will approach with them to pray, as in Yasna 28, verse 2 and 3, with hands stretched out, with homage and with vigor. 9. And he looks to attain the object of his prayers by religious self-control and faithful action. 10. His efforts vie with the heavenly bodies in the praise of God. Because obviously, if unlike this take off the natural man and that sort of talk that you heard in Christianity and Manichaeism and some stuff like that, all this stuff is like I'm on the side of this, I'm benedictions upon this, and I'm mentioning the glory of this and that and the other, but it's all to worship God. 11. Therefore he will persevere, and as a praiser king, so the Pahlavi, and all in one place, and he beseeches that Ahura, the life-giver, may help on the all-engrossing cause. And the translation, Yasna 49, verse 12. What aids of grace hast thou for thine invoking Zarathustra? O Ahura Mazda, to grant him through thy righteous order, yea, what aids of grace hast thou for me as, through thy good mind given within my soul, for me who will still pray to thee with praises, O great Creator, beseeching what is in accordance with your wished for aim is best. Yasna 50 verse 1. Doth my soul indeed obtain assisting grace, which of thy blessings is that gift to me, O Lord? What saving champion is found to save both flocks and herds? And who for myself other than thy righteous order and thyself, Ahura, tell me, O ye invoked ones, are what of grace is there for me to save thy best mind itself? 2. And if thy guardian is verily to save her wealth, how shall he obtain, and by what means shall he seek after that joy-creating kind who is the living symbol of our peace? How shall that man obtain his wish, who shall desire to see her provided with pastures for dweller of this land? That only way is righteousness. Do thou then grant me lands, so would I ask of thee, which live in justice in the many splendors of the sun, and lands which openly thus live, and which are to be sought and gained by me as conquest for the cause. Give thou this gift. 3. Yea, let that joy-creating one be his possession through the righteous order, which he helps to bring, that living sign, which the most valiant citizen may give to him at once reward and change, and in accordance with the sovereign authority, may that heroic settler grant him this gift. He who may make the last imperiled farm to flourish in the vigor of thy blessed prosperity, the tract which lies the nearest to the fields which our foeman holds as his. 4. And therefore both in thankfulness and hope will I give sacrifice to you with praises, O Ahura Mazda, together with thine order and thy best mind, in thy saints, and in accordance with thy sacred sovereign power, by whose help the witcher, heaven-bound, may stand upon the certain pathway, and in thine home of song shall I, by means of these my Yasnas offered here, there hear the praises of thine offspring saints, who see thy face. 5. And we are in readiness as well to fulfill your praises and declare your words, O Ahura Mazda, through your grace and in accordance with your holy order, since ye advance with friendliness to cheer the speaker of your Mathra word, with open acts of visible relief, as if with hand sent forth, whereby that Mathra speaker of your truth may bring us on and settle us in weal and bliss. 6. Therefore will I incite him to his task the more, let him indeed proclaim the righteous way. He who already lifts his voice in Mathras, O Ahura Mazda, he, Zarathustra, the faithful friend in accordance with the holy order and with self-abasing worship, giver of understanding for this land, voice, guider of the way to glory. Let him indeed proclaim and teach my regulations, and in accordance with thy good mind, as his law. 7. And together with that chief speaker of your word, I would engage yet others in the cause. Your well-incited and swift servants, O Ahura, would I yoke on as steeds to take their holy course towards heaven, gaining thereby at last the bridges where your adoration rolls and is complete. Yea, I yoke on your mighty ones with thy holy order and thy good mind, and with these may ye drive on. Be ye for my help. 8. And as I yoke on your Mathra speakers for their course, then would I myself approach you in the highest deed of worship, and with these sacred metric feet of Zarathustra, and his peers, those which are heard and famed afar as the metric feet of zealous worship, and with my hands stretched out in supplicating prayer, yea, you would I approach, O Mazda, in union with your sacred ritual truth, and with the homage of a freely giving helper, and with the good virtue of your good mind in my soul. 9. Yea, with these Yasnas of your sacrifice, would I approach you, praising back to you, in answer to your mercies. In answer to your mercies, O Ahura, and thou, O righteousness, in the holy actions of your good mind, as he moves within us. So long, indeed, as I shall have the power commanding at my will over this my sacred privilege and gift, and doing as the wise man, thus may I, like him, become a supplicant who gains his ends. 10. Mine every wish and prayer is this, and therefore whatsoever I shall do, and whatsoever deeds of ritual and truth I shall yet further do, on account of, and make full, these prior deeds of worship, yea, whatsoever holy works shine bright, as having worth in all men's eyes through thy good mind, whose character they share these as the stars, suns, and the aurora, which brings on the light of days, are all through the righteous order the speakers of thy praise, O thou great giver, Lord. 11. Your praiser then, by eminence, would I be named, and more would be it, so long as by thine inspiring righteousness I'm thus able, and may have the power, and may the Maker of the world give help through his implanted good mind in my fellow servants, and may that all be done to further us, which through his veritable grace is most promotive for the cause. And so we see with that some of these implementations, in verse 9, in the parentheses, that as he moves within us, you feel like they're leading towards the Christian doctrine there. We are the Yasna 34. That's where we'll pick up the commentary. Ner Yosung has, in reference, I guess this is going to be the whole of verse 12. Kim to samarganam kila karyam te kim mahanya yittaram ka kama kaka yushmakam stute kaka yushmakam egisne srenome mahagnanin prakrishtam bruhe yat ketse dharmasya samarganam aho vises eshna pasya tasmat mahanya yittarat kuru siksha paya asmakam dharmasya margam utamena svadinam manasa margam yam purvan yavantam asmabhyam brohe. And is made the parts by verse 13 here. Observe the certainty of a subtle meaning. The way is the consciousness are laws. We don't have to wait for the Zohar to say, well, okay, well, there's the body, and then there's there's the clothes, and then there's the the bones or the body, and then there's the spirit. So the spirit is where it all lies, right? Because laws or rules, you could say, are the body, or the bones of it all. And so the well-doer thrives for his righteousness. Geldner has admirably suggested that a comparison with Vrog on account of the connection way, but as this necessitates two Urvas, or Vraz, Urvas, or Vraz, as in, and as Ahura is spoken of as dwelling in paths, I do not think that thriving in paths is very difficult. The prominent thought is not the going, but the right going. That path indicates the reward, and so the Pahlavi Kashido, now you're saying, has Asva Daya, but we must be thankful for the keen and vigorous discussion. Compare Vak Shanguha Gaya Genga Asa. The Pahlavi has Hu, Ravak, Mani, and Yasna 44:8. If Vrog is compared, the idea must be happy progress, but Var, justi in Latin, I guess, seems to be more obviously the correspondent. Asha is often personified as a stronger impression than saying correctly. Of course, our life on earth is merely in the bodily state. Compare Yasna 28:3. There, Astavat Aska evidently means of earth, Manango of heaven, of corporeal, of mind without body. With the mature, drivable cow, she goes on her path of toil. And kind these further of verse 14. Safraz Yahabun. And later, at the end of that verse, understanding the action, observe that Verezena cannot well mean stall in this land. The Pahlavi likewise sees Verezia eat in it. Now Yosung has Vidyate, both free as to form, and the mention of the word, but it looks like we're going to go over the whole verse, aren't we? Ner Yosung has Sa Yato, Mahag Nyanin, Kamo Smakam Yat, Tanumate, Givamate, Dihyate, Akaryaya, Utamena, Karmana, Manasa, Kshatriyaya, Yaska, Gava, Akaryatra, Aginamnya, Kutum Ben Yo Yush Makam, Sun Irvanagyanataya, Svamin Buddhyaka, Punyapradhataya, Vindiyate Dina. And in the final verse here, the confessing, verse 15, I conclude the shade of meaning to the constant and unbearing evidences of the Pahlavi translator. He translates uniformly by Avam, Yaha, Buned are its equivalents. And, the progressiveness, we're talking about bringing on the millennial perfection, which is not the same as the messianic issue that some groups would have, right? When progress shall have been completed, the Pahlavi translation is as follows: Pavanzak I lekum kudai ye au harmazd frasha kardo pavan kamako ashkarako den ahvano yaha buni ait Nerjosang has Yushma Kam Ragyana Svamin Akshayatvam Sakyaya Paris Hutam, or is it Paris Hotam Dasyata Bhuvana. And we have our introduction to the Yasna Ushtavati, but we have salvation as announced as universal for believers, reflections of Zarathustra upon sublimity and bountifulness of Ahura, and very likely our first note is going to be with the, oh, it's not. So for, okay, well, let's, salvation to this man. We have Ana Eshem Mano Ana Eshem Vako Ana Eshem Sia'atbenem. Prove that thought, word, and deed referred to were not limited to a ritual meaning. And, well, the point is driven home nonetheless. So, later in that verse, he may be around that. We have, I turn from the rendering of the Pahlavi with the greatest reluctance. Naduk Valaman Moon Zak E Valaman Naduki Kadarzai Aig Kadarzai Ansuta Min Naduki E Valaman Naduki. Happy is he whose benefit is for every one, that is, for every man there is happiness from his benefit. Nerjosang follows. And there's a question whether the particle gat in around yea verily in 1 gat may have not originated from gat. Barth here follows at the Pahlavi reading Gatoe Pavan Yam Tunisno. Lak may have been added as often to serve as an alternate rendering. Maintaining righteousness, I will, so Professor Jolly says it's an imperative. See also the Pahlavi, Breya Homand, not as a rendering merely, but as a philological analogion, otherwise riches, for the splendor.